From 2Keto LLC, it's Keto Woman Podcast with Daisy Brackenhall.
Hello, Keto Lovelies. I'm Daisy Brackenhall, and I've spent most of my life struggling with my weight and confidence, and have always had a difficult relationship with food. Even when I finally got to my target weight, after weight loss surgery and eating low carb, I couldn't maintain it and I was miserable. Keto has given me the freedom to fall in love with food again, without the constant gain, loss, guilt, virtue cycle of before. Health and happiness is where it's at now, running on fat. Welcome to the Keto Woman Podcast. Each week I'll be chatting to inspirational women, maybe even the odd man, to discover the secrets to their success so that I can share them with you. So what is keto? Keto is a way of eating that enables you to switch your body's main fuel source from sugar to fat. Who doesn't want to be a fat burner, right? But how do we achieve this? A great place to start is by keeping carbs to 20 grams or less per day. So things like leafy greens and above ground vegetables, plus some nuts and seeds, and the incidental carbs you find in things like dairy. Moderate protein scaled to your lean body mass, and then fat to satiety. Once you're in the swing of things, you can tweak it to suit you. Make your own personalised keto. I'll be asking my guest each week what their keto looks like to show you just how flexible and fabulous this way of eating can be. I'm not a doctor, and most of my guests won't be either, so we can't give you medical advice. It's always best to work with your own doctor because they know you and your medical history, and so have access to the bigger picture. This week's extraordinary woman is Amy Berger. Amy, MS, CNS, NTP, is a US Air Force veteran, certified nutrition specialist, and nutritional therapy practitioner who specialises in using low-carbohydrate nutrition to help people reclaim their vitality through eating delicious foods. She loves showing people that getting and staying well doesn't require starvation, deprivation, or living at the gym. Her motto is "Real people need real food." She blogs at chewitnutrition.com, where she writes about a wide range of health and nutrition-related topics, such as insulin, metabolism, weight loss, thyroid function, and more. She is the author of The Alzheimer's Antidote, using a low-carb, high-fat diet to fight Alzheimer's disease, memory loss, and cognitive decline. I've long been a fan of Amy's articles and very much enjoy her writing style. It was a great pleasure to throw around some common bugbears that we both have, as well as hopefully dispelling a few keto myths that perpetuate online. I hope you enjoy our conversation as much as I did. Welcome, Amy, to the Keto Woman Podcast. How are you doing today?
I'm good. Thanks for having me.
It's a pleasure to have you here. So, I was reading in your bio that you're a US Air Force veteran, and now you blog about and have written books to do with low carb and keto. Perhaps you could tell me a bit about how you got from one to the other.
Yeah, I've been eating low carb myself for a very long time, even before I was in the military. So I've dabbled in various careers and jobs looking for something that I enjoyed, looking for something that I felt fulfilled by and that I felt like was meaningful and that I wanted to do. And the military, I don't regret serving. I'm proud to have served, but it wasn't for me. It wasn't going to be a lifetime career. And I said to myself, what is a career that I think I would enjoy, that I think I could make a living at, and that would be more fulfilling to me. And I said, I think I could help other people with low carb. I help myself, and there is actually such a job as nutritionist. Maybe I could do that. So I actually went to graduate school for nutrition after I got out of the military. I used some of the education benefits to get my degree in nutrition. I've been eating low carb myself long before I ever got the formal education in it.
Is it a way of eating that you were able to sustain while you were in the military? I know I have spoken to a couple of people in my Facebook group, actually, who struggle a bit with that.
It wasn't easy, but depending on what food is available to you, it can be easier or harder. And so it depends on where you're stationed. And if you are at the mercy of a dining facility or what we sort of call a chow hall, there's maybe less selection that's maybe low carb. There's always something available. They tend to have a salad bar. You can get some type of meat entree. You do have to be a little more careful about the kind of sauces it's in, or it might have breading on it. But a lot of people, at least in the U.S. military, I don't know how it is in other countries, but in the U.S., unless you're deployed, you're generally at home. You have a job, an office, you go, you do your job, and you go home. So you can still eat your meals at home or prepare your meals to take with you. So in that sense, it's really no more difficult than doing it in any other situation, but it does just depend on where you are and what's available to you. I mean, for me, like when I was deployed to Iraq for a few months and I lost weight, I did amazingly out there, but I was very fortunate that the dining facility we had a really great salad bar, really great cold cuts like lunch meat. So, maybe not the best premium quality food, but certainly very low carb and keto friendly, provided you made the right choices.
Right. Okay. Yeah. So it sounds like you can at least stay the majority of the way there anyway. So what does your keto or your low carb look like on a day-to-day basis?
I do try to say the phrase low carb more than keto because for my own personal diet, I am more low carb. I do bounce in and out of ketosis just naturally, just by what I'm eating or not eating on any particular day, but I don't deliberately aim to, always be under 20 or 30 grams of carbs, and I don't go out of my way to add fat to things. So I am definitely low carb. I couldn't even ballpark the grams because I really don't track very often. So sometimes I'm very, very low carb, sometimes not. I'm never eating like 200 grams of carbs a day, but some days 50, 75 grams, maybe up there. I mean, that's rare. To be honest, I did get a little too liberal with my carb intake for a while, and I gained some weight. And so now I am kind of back on the lower carb, leaning toward ketogenic side to kind of get things back to balance. But I don't, as a general rule, I don't always aim to be in ketosis. So like, I'm not afraid of eating red peppers and tomatoes and like vegetables and other items that are, perfectly acceptable for a low carb diet, but maybe someone who really needs to be in a therapeutic state of ketosis would maybe avoid or eat a lot less of.
Exactly. I was going to say, when you talked about getting liberal with carbs, I imagine that means eating more vegetables, maybe more nuts, seeds, things like that. You're not talking about going out and eating a load of white bread or something.
Oh, no, I wish that's what it meant. I mean, I'm going to be perfectly honest with your audience. I really never hide anything. No, I was a little too liberal with carbohydrate in general. Not, and it's not that I would ever start my morning with a glass of orange juice and a plate of pancakes, but the little every now and then treat was becoming a much more regular thing. Oh, I'll just have one slice of bread. Oh, this time I'll eat the bun on the hamburger. And that kind of stuff, when it really happens rarely, is not that big a deal, but it was becoming not so rare for me. Oh, I'll have that piece of candy. I'll have that piece of cake. But live and learn, it was a learning experience, and I paid the price, and now I'm getting back on track.
Exactly. It creeps up, doesn't it? And it can go, certainly for me, it can go from, well, just that one time, or just that, I had it then, so I'll just have it again. And usually for me, it's when I go back to the UK. And before I know it, those couple of things, and I know some people can do that rarely. And actually, when I'm in France all the time, and I'm on track and I'm feeling great, I can go out for a meal in a restaurant, and although I'll make as keto choices as possible, I can have dessert, and it might kick me out of ketosis overnight, but it's not going to have a massive impact on my mood, on my cravings, that one-off.
Exactly. Yeah.
But it tends to be when I go back to the UK, it's not just a one-off, and it spirals and it snowballs and it turns into an avalanche. And before I know it, I'm on the floor with depression and migraines, and it's hard to climb back up. So, it really does depend on the individual and how they're going to react to those kind of things, doesn't it?
Yeah, it depends on the individual, and it depends on how liberal you become, how often it happens, and how much carbohydrate you have in a sitting, I think.
Exactly. And what are the benefits you get from eating this way, apart from the weight loss that you've mentioned already?
Well, When I started low carb, I was actually in college the first time I tried it. So many, many years ago. It did not stick the first time. I think I was just too young. I wasn't really ready to do this for a lifetime. So I was kind of in my early 20s, I think, when it finally stuck. But thankfully, I was just overweight. I didn't have any real major health problems. You hear so many stories about acne and GERD and all these like type 2 diabetes, morbid obesity, all these things that this way of eating, these people experience these radical transformations. I didn't really have that because all I had was a little bit of extra weight. I was probably about 20 or 25 pounds overweight. But I do have a family history of type 2 diabetes, stroke, and cancer. So I started out from the weight loss goal. But at this point, I'm convinced that if I hadn't found low carb when I did, right now, if I had kept eating the way I was before, I probably would be obese now. I'd probably have type 2 diabetes, maybe PCOS. So I see it as a potentially preventative thing. And I do like that I can go. I never had hypoglycemia. I was never like, I have to eat right now. But certainly, I needed to snack during the day. I would always make sure I had food with me. Couldn't imagine going 8-10 hours without eating. So now that's pretty effortless. I just don't feel the need to be snacking all day. I can just have a nice sized meal and go many hours comfortably. Physically, I feel well. I have good energy. I don't know if the camera's picking it up, but my skin is clear.
Yep,
so
it is. I can attest to that.
I just think I just feel well. And I can't confirm that I would not feel well if I wasn't eating low carb, but I feel like knowing what I know about how low carb works, I do attribute a lot of that to the way I eat.
Exactly. That's one of the things I can certainly attest to for me, that not eating this way does make me feel bad. I think that's actually one of the advantages if you do go off track, to see what the difference is.
Yeah.
And I can see that radical change.
Yeah. And I can say I do lean toward depression. I deal with depression a lot.
Mm-hmm,
and
me too. Yeah.
Like I said, I bounce in and out of ketosis. And I do know that when I am in a deeper state of ketosis, I do feel better. My mood, I'm much more optimistic, much more positive and self-confident, when normally that stuff is not there. So that's, I know I'm not alone in that, experiencing the mood benefits of ketosis.
Absolutely. It's exactly the same for me. I certainly approached low carb and then keto from a weight loss perspective. And I think this happens with a lot of people. That might be why they start it, why they go looking for it in the first place. But the main reason they stay are the health benefits. And yes, for me, it's the same. Depression and migraines are so much better now.
Yeah.
That's the reason you stay. And that's what I can see a clear difference with. If I stop being keto, they come back with an absolute vengeance. So,
right.
It really does make a difference. So I think it would be really interesting. You've written many great articles, but it would be great for newbies and people who've been on keto for a bit longer alike to talk a little bit about some of the things that worry them and get them in a panic. And one of those is measuring ketones, and also the difference between being in ketosis versus being fat adapted, because you can get into ketosis relatively quickly, but becoming fat adapted is slightly different, isn't it? So perhaps you could talk a bit more about that and explain to people the real difference.
Yeah, so this is such a huge point, because it's great that low carbohydrate and especially ketogenic diets are becoming so much more popular. But because they're so much more popular, there's so much information out there.
Too much.
Yeah, it's too much. It's great because there's a lot of good, reliable, accurate information, but there's also a lot of nonsense and a lot of misleading and inaccurate information. And, if people are brand new, they don't know what's what. They don't know what to trust. I think people, when they're new especially, they don't understand that the vast majority of the benefits of this way of eating, the vast majority of the effects, come from much, much lower blood sugar and much, much lower insulin. The effects don't come from the presence of very high ketones. So for most people, and there's exceptions, but for most people who are looking for the metabolic benefits, whether that's fat loss or better blood sugar control, like you said, migraines, treating, improving gout, like all of these conditions that stem from insulin resistance, the reason these things improve on a low carb or ketogenic diet is because you correct the chronically high glucose and insulin. It's not because of the high ketones. So there's really no reason for most people to chase high ketones. There's no reason to worry that, oh, my ketones are only 0.4 or 0. Whatever. Should I fast? Should I put butter in my coffee? I have to add fat to things to make them more keto. No, you don't. If you want to do that because you enjoy the flavor or you feel a noticeable benefit, then do it. But for most people, you don't have to chase these very high ketones. So with regard to being fat adapted versus in ketosis, it really just depends on how you define these things. For me, being in ketosis is if you were to measure your blood, breath, or urine ketones, you will see ketones. What range they fall into differs. I know Dr. Stephen Finney and Dr. Jeff Volek put the threshold for nutritional ketosis at beta hydroxybutyrate of 0.5. Some people disagree with that. But whatever the point is that you would see slightly to largely elevated ketones in the blood, breath, or urine. To me, that's in ketosis. Being fat adapted to me has nothing to do with your ketone level. It has everything to do with keeping your carbohydrate intake low enough that your body is forced to transition to running on a different fuel, and the fuel it will turn to is fat. And when you know you're fat adapted, regardless of what your ketone level happens to be, it's when you can go comfortably many hours without eating. You don't get shaky. You don't get irritable. When you do start to feel hungry again, you don't really crave sugar. You'd rather have a steak and spinach or a pork chop and cauliflower than a big donut. And that's, some people will still crave donuts, but that's the difference to me, that you can be fat adapted. You can have that fat-based metabolism even if your ketones aren't very high. And on the other side, for example, if you were to take exogenous ketones or take a bunch of MCT oil, you will have elevated ketones, but you might not be fat adapted. You can eat a bowl of spaghetti and take 2 tablespoons of MCT oil and you will be, quote, in ketosis because you'll pee on a stick and it'll turn purple. But it's coming from the MCTs. It's not coming because your body is generating ketones.
Yeah, exactly. And this is what drives me a little bit insane, actually.
It drives me a lot of bit insane.
This term that's bandied about, just, you've got to get into ketosis and then that's it. You're done, you're sold, everything's going to magically change for you. And like you say, it's actually very easy to get in ketosis, and a lot of people will do that quite naturally. I mean, my brother, for example, was talking about how he knew when he switches into ketosis when he's running a marathon, and he's, a carb burner versus he's not, a carb burner rather than a fat burner, but he gets to a point in that marathon where he feels the change in his body. His saliva tastes different. He says he gets this sort of a bit of an electric buzz. And so that's happened in a matter of a couple of hours. He's now in ketosis.
Right.
But he's not fat adapted.
Exactly, yeah.
And it's that difference. And you mentioned exogenous ketones, and that's something that gets pushed and pushed and pushed. And I think is partly responsible for this whole, just this obsession with, I've got to be in ketosis, is that they say, right, you just drink this drink and you're going to be in ketosis, and we can prove it by the color that the pea stick turns. And that's it. You're set, you're done. But
yeah, I think a lot of the marketing with those exogenous ketones is very misleading and inaccurate. But I don't think that that's where a lot of this is coming from. I think it's actually coming from even within the low carb and ketogenic community. Frankly, I really feel we're using the word ketogenic and emphasizing keto and ketogenic a little too much. That's why I'm so adamant about saying the phrase low carb. Mm-hmm. because what's responsible for the metabolic benefits of the diet is a very low carbohydrate intake, not the presence of the ketones. That's like the most fundamental, most important thing for people to understand. I'm not opposed to the word ketogenic, but people need to understand what it means. When we emphasize that phrase keto or the word ketogenic, I think that's what makes people think that they need to chase high ketones, that they need to put coconut oil in their coffee, and they need to put, 3 pats of butter on their steak that's already fatty. 80% of my time with clients is spent debunking these myths. It's mostly women who are struggling with fat loss. And I tell them, well, walk me through a few days of what you're eating. What are your typical meals? And it's always the fatty coffee. Then I have 2 fat bombs. And then I have, a salad with 3 ounces of cheese. And I think we've sort of done this to ourselves because the buzzword is keto. The buzzword is keto, ketogenic. Somewhere along the way, the phrase low carb became inadequate, it's not good enough. And they're not different. Keto is maybe a low carb to a higher degree. Mm-hmm. It's very, very low carb, but that's where we're getting into trouble. We are emphasizing the ketogenic aspect more so than the low carb aspect.
I've got you, yes. And I agree. And I see it in a lot of groups. And I hate it when people call it a fad diet, but in some ways it's kind of become a fad diet for some people because they think just simply by being keto it's all going to work without understanding, like you're saying, the whole process that leads to that. And actually keto is just kind of it's that cut-off point for being in a ketogenic state. And there are very good reasons for some people to get to that point, to be in a ketogenic state. Like we discussed earlier, a certain level of ketones in the blood can help with certain things. And I certainly see that. If I fall below a certain level, I see a change to my mood. On the other end of the scale, actually, if I go too high, I go a little bit nuts too. So,
that's interesting.
Yeah, there's obviously a range that's good for me, that's going to be different for you and different for somebody else. So you talk about becoming fat adapted. And that's something that in a just most basic sense, you can tell the difference because it's going to take a bit more time.
Yes, yeah.
And you talked about some of the things you can look out for. But what are the changes that are going on in your body that take you from, I suppose I like to call the carb burning state to the fat burning state? I mean, you were saying you are kind of training your body to react in a different way. Tell us a bit more about how that actually works. What's going on inside?
Yeah, before I get to that, though, I want to go back to what you were saying about the ketones just for a minute, because I don't want people to think that I'm completely against measuring ketones or that there's no role for elevated ketones. I think there are some medical conditions or even, like we said, mood things that for some people, you might have to reach a certain threshold of ketones before you notice an improvement. I just think for most people who just want to feel well and lose weight, that's not the case. But that doesn't mean that nobody should ever measure ketones. Mm-hmm. With what you were just asking now, I'm not sure that I know exactly what goes on. I mean, what's believed to go on during fat adaptation is that your body sort of ramps up the production of enzymes and brings other processes online that are responsible for breaking down the fats and using the ketones more so than the glucose. I don't know precisely how long that takes. Some people will even say mitochondrial biogenesis, you're building new mitochondria, you're building healthier mitochondria that are better at burning fat. That sounds right, but I don't know. I don't know if anyone's really identified what is the exact thing happening at the cellular level during what we would call fat adaptation.
And I think it's unlikely that it's going to be the same for two different people anyway. I suppose the point I'm making is that it's a process that is going to take more than a day.
Definitely.
You can get in ketosis within hours, but to become fat adapted is going to take you, at least a few weeks and probably more likely a few months.
Yes. Yeah. And everybody is different because I know some of the elite athletes that use ketogenic diets, it takes them months before they come back to their peak performance. There's a big decline at first while they're adjusting, and it does take months. It's not a days or weeks process, it's months.
Right. And I know that's something that's quite off-putting to a lot of athletes and why they don't want to try it, because they're going to have to suffer that downturn before they can see an overall improvement.
Yeah.
So back to measuring ketones. If you choose to, a lot of people start with pea sticks, and some people say that they're of use, some people say they're no use, and that blood ketones or breath ketones are the only way to go. What are your thoughts on that?
So, I mean, I've heard from people that if they've been doing a ketogenic diet for a long time, eventually the urine strips no longer register. So, but that doesn't happen to everyone. That hasn't happened to me. I can still use them and they still register. So I think maybe it's an individual thing. For some people, clearly they do work no matter how long you've been doing it. And for some people, they don't. Obviously, the urine measuring is much, much more budget friendly than the blood. I mean, the blood is expensive. The meter is cheap. Where they get you is with the test strips. Mm-hmm. It's the same thing with the glucose meter. The meters are inexpensive, but the strips are a fortune. So if somebody wants to measure, use whatever method you want, but you really, really have to understand, and this is why I wrote about this, that ketone levels fluctuate throughout the day. And so because the blood test strips are so expensive, if you can only afford to test once a day or 3 times a week or even twice a day, you're not really getting a full accurate picture. You're really getting only a single snapshot in time. So you might, oh my God, my ketones are only 0.3. What am I doing wrong? Well, they could be 2.6 3 hours later, but you don't know because you're not going to test. And really, people's bodies vary a lot in their natural tendency to just easily generate high ketones. You'll see this on social media all the time. People will post like a glucometer and their ketone meter side by side. And some people can have a blood glucose of 97 and ketones of 2.5. And some people will have a glucose of 68 and a ketone of 0.6. So there's not even a correlation between the glucose and the ketones for most people. Well, not most, at least some people. They don't correlate. And some people really have to go to like extraordinary measures to get those higher ketone levels. They have to fast. They have to do the bulletproof coffee, exercise, who knows what. I'm not against measuring, but you really have to understand how to interpret the numbers. You can't feel like a failure if you see 0.2 and you think you're doing something wrong. You know, maybe you are. Maybe you are eating too much carbohydrate, or maybe your body just is not going to get to 4.0 without you fasting for a week. Mm-hmm. Nobody should feel like ketone envy or ketone shame. The bottom line of this way of eating is how you feel. Or if you're trying to lose weight, are you losing weight? If you have a medical condition, is it getting better? That's what matters, not your ketone level.
Spot on, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, maybe all that will happen. Maybe you'll lose weight. Your skin will clear up. Your PMS will go away. Maybe all these things will improve with a ketone level of 0.1, 0.2. Mm-hmm. It's an individual thing. And I know people want black and white answers. But there aren't any. It really varies. It's really individual. And it would be easier if it was black and white. If I could say, eat this exact thing and do this exact exercise and your ketones will be 3.0. It doesn't work that way.
I think that's part of the thing. And you picked up on that with the postings on social media and this ketone envy, as it were. And I suppose in a way it's not necessarily envy, but I suppose it's if people who are, they're people you look up to and you're following what they do. And so your automatic thought is, well, if they're getting that, that's what I need to get. And it's comparing yourself to somebody else, which is never a good thing. Right. And also, having your expectations the same as somebody else, which is not a good thing. As you mentioned, it's so individual. And I think it's a really good point to, write down and be exact about why are you doing this? And are you getting those results? And it can be really useful to keep a track of what your levels are, to correlate, against your mood and things, as we've discussed. But it's not important and it's not imperative to have those high numbers to get the results that you need necessarily for you.
Right. I mean, I did a video for another group a while back where I mentioned the Atkins diet. And Dr. Atkins wrote his first low-carb book in 1972. We're talking over 40 years ago. And at that time, I don't know about the 70s, I read the 1992 version of the book. And when I first started the diet in like the year 2000 or so, there were no home ketone blood meters and there were no breath meters. There were the urine strips. Mm-hmm. That's all there was to measure. So nobody could measure blood ketones, and people did great on the Atkins diet just by following the plan as written, by keeping carbs very low. They did great, and nobody knew what their ketone level was. And if, I know your audience is very savvy, very educated in all the research on low carb, so they're probably familiar with the Virta company that's sort of doing like a long distance remote diabetes reversal type program. They published a study a few months ago where, they're getting people off of medication left and right, eliminating people's insulin, eliminating people's, antacids and blood pressure medication. And the mean ketone level in that cohort was 0.6. That's not that high. You can reverse type 2 diabetes without ketones of 3.5. And if the average level was 0.6, that means there were a lot of people lower than that. Yeah. And they still got off their meds. They still got their glucose and insulin down. So I just, one more quick thing with regard to the, why aren't my ketones high? What am I doing wrong? In one of my blog posts, I showed a graphic of the biochemical process by which ketones are generated so that people could see that the different substrates that you actually, quote unquote, burn or that we convert into energy, into ATP, you can create ATP energy from fat without it leading to high ketones as a byproduct. You can still be feeding fat into the cycle and the ketones just don't build up. So you're absolutely fat adapted, you're burning fat, you have a fat-based metabolism, even if your ketone levels are not high.
And in some ways, for some people, actually having lower blood ketones could be an indication that they're much more efficient at using them. It's something that struck me. It was this light bulb moment when I was reading this particular article that we will link to in the show notes. And it made me think, as I mentioned before, when I go a little bit nutty when my ketones are too high, that I thought, well, perhaps what that is telling me is that I'm not doing enough exercise to get more efficient in using them. So, and I know many people who have low blood ketone readings, but they're obviously very efficient at using them in their body because they do very, very well.
That's true, but here's the even more interesting thing to me. Like, people don't realize that there are 3 main fuel sources in the body: glucose, fats, and ketones. We only have meters to measure 2 of those.
Right.
Glucose and ketones. There's no home fatometer. There's no fatty acid meter. And in people on low carb and ketogenic diets, the predominant fuel is fatty acids. It's not ketones. So I also think in some of these people that the ketone levels are not very high. What you probably have is a high level of fatty acids. You're burning all the fat, which is exactly what we want on this diet, especially if your goal is fat loss. That's what you want. You don't care what the ketone level is. You want to be tapping into that stored body fat. I think if somebody could develop some type of meter, like how many grams of fat am I burning per hour?
Oh, that would be lovely.
Yeah, that would so put people's fears to rest about the ketones. Like, I just think that blows people's minds. They forget it's not a binary glucose or ketones. There's fat. Mm-hmm. Fat is by far the majority fuel when you're on a low carb diet. We just can't measure it. And ketones, they say every biochemistry textbook you'll read says ketone bodies are a byproduct of incomplete fat oxidation. So what if you're actually so efficient at metabolizing the fat that you are completely oxidizing the fat molecule and you're not building up ketones? Like, I just think I either wish that these home ketone meters were never invented, or you should have to sit through a 5-hour lecture about ketogenesis before you're allowed to use it. Like, I'm not against measuring, but I want people to understand how to use the data and how to interpret what they see is all.
Exactly. And not get freaked out by it.
Yeah.
And so, the takeaway message from that really is that you absolutely don't need to measure. Going by how you feel and the results you're getting is going to be enough for most people. If there's some kind of therapeutic reason you need to have them within a certain range, great, it's worth testing. If you're just a bit of a data junkie and like following patterns like I do, great. But it doesn't necessarily mean certainly what you think it does. or perhaps anything much at all.
Yeah, I also think people, if you're going to measure, try to divorce yourself emotionally from the number. It's the same thing that happens when we get on the scale. Mostly women, but it's happening to men now too. Whatever number you see, just take it as feedback. Take it as information that's telling you what your body's doing. Don't take it as the determiner of whether you're a good human being, of whether you deserve to have a good day, of whether you're a failure. It's just a number. And we let it like ruin us. We let it destroy us. And it's human nature. I mean, we all do it, but I wish we didn't.
Yes, exactly. And it's keeping it relative and just seeing your patterns, what's relative to you. And that's where it gets difficult when you start comparing to somebody else, start comparing to someone else's numbers, whether it be weight loss, whether it be ketones, whatever it is. It's irrelevant when it comes to that because they're not you. You're not them.
Exactly.
And Stephen Finney has this great quote where people ask him all the time, what should I do? What's going to work for me? Tell me what you do. And he says, I can't unless you're my Siamese twin or my clone. What works for me isn't necessarily going to work for you. I love that. It always makes me laugh.
Yeah. And people don't want that answer. They want to tell me exactly what to do. But unfortunately, it doesn't. The human body is not, it's not a machine. It's not like an industrial machine where you put one thing in and the exact same thing comes out every time. It just isn't.
Yeah. And especially when you're so variable. I mean, women change so much during their monthly cycle. It's different. Mm-hmm. What works for you one week might be slightly different another week and so on. So you just have to roll with it, don't you? And talking about changes, individuals, what works for one person that doesn't work for somebody else. We were talking earlier about this phrase that drives us a bit nuts, getting kicked out of ketosis, and how people really get their knickers in a twist and panic if they've gone out and they've eaten something either on purpose as a cheat meal. I mean, I hate that word. I try not to use it, but or, by accident. Sometimes someone will eat something that they think is completely compliant with their way of eating, and they discover later that, it had a load of sugar in it or something, and they feel the effects straight away. And if they're measuring, they say, oh no, I've been kicked out of ketosis. Woe is me, everything's going to go wrong. And you've written a great article about this, so perhaps you can just expand on that a bit and your thoughts on it and how it's not really any reason to get as panicked as people do.
Yeah. The overarching theme of that is what we've been talking about in ketosis versus fat adapted. And, you and I, before we started recording, we kind of talked about that magic phrase that I have in that blog post about if you've been eating this way for a long time, low carb or ketogenic, and you are fat adapted and you've been fat adapted for a while, one high carb meal or even one high carb day doesn't undo all the months or years of fat adaptation that you've built into your body in the same way that back when you were a carb eater and you were living on sugar all the time, one low carb day or one healthy meal doesn't undo all the damage from that. It's just give your body more credit for being robust like that. Now, if you do have a medical condition that requires ketosis, then you probably will feel terrible. You're going to have some very negative effects from a cheat or a treat or whatever you want to call it. But if you've chosen to eat whatever, a piece of cake, a bagel, or just like you said, maybe by accident, some people you didn't realize something had a filler in it or some kind of sauce that was loaded with sugar. Usually, now, and this is variable, but as soon as that carbohydrate is out of your body, you'll be back to fat burning. Yes, as soon as that carbohydrate comes in, you're going to be working on that, but you're not going to be a sugar burner for 4 days off of one slice of bread or one, sandwich. It varies though, because I have heard reports from people that they'll have a high carb meal. And if they do measure ketones, it takes them 3-4 days. But I think that's rare. There's ways to prime the system too. If you know that on the weekend you have a wedding to go to or a party and there's going to be something there that I just really love, and I'm going to let myself have it. Like, I'm just going to enjoy life and I'm going to have it. Give that carbohydrate somewhere to go. You could fast, skip breakfast and lunch so you have a nice high carb dinner, or do a heavy workout, or even don't do any of that, but the next day do a heavy workout. Get rid of that glycogen as soon as you can. I'm not encouraging cheating here, but what I want to do is like calm people down and reassure them that one carby thing here and there isn't going to destroy you. But I have to clarify, the more you do that, like we said at the beginning, how I was becoming too liberal with my own carbohydrate intake, the more often you do that, you probably will start to gain weight again. Your health problems will start to come back. So you have to find the balance that's right for you. But I can't emphasize enough that the longer you've been low carb or keto, the less of an effect the occasional little treat, the less sort of damage, the less of an effect that's going to have.
Exactly, because your body has just got very efficient. So if you throw that carby meal in that's going to mess things up, it's not going to mess things up for long. It's just, and when I say mess up is a bad word, because all it means is, like you say, that your body's just got to process a load of glucose, and as soon as it's done that, it's going to be fine again. And the better you've got your machine working, the faster it's going to do that. And yes, for some people, it does seem to take longer. And that's the kind of person that is not going to work with eating strictly during the week and every weekend having a carb blowout, because they're probably going to take best part of that week.
Exactly.
But they're going to do fine with, once every 3 months or something.
Yeah. And I do think you have to know yourself, because it is a slippery slope for sure. There's a lot of people in the low carb and keto world who have a binge eating history or food addiction issues. I think we all have it to some extent. Like, I'm not immune to those things. So you have to know yourself. If you're the type of person that can have one piece of cake at the wedding or one of grandma's cookies at Christmas and move on, great. But if you're the type where that one piece of cake becomes two and then it becomes a bagel the next morning for breakfast and pasta for dinner, maybe you can't. Maybe you can never have that stuff. And thank goodness, if you're ambitious, if you have the time and the will, there's almost nothing that you can't make a keto version of. It might be more expensive. You might have to buy the almond flour and the erythritol and all these ingredients, but thanks to Maria Emmerich and Martina Slayerova and like all these great cookbook authors, there's really nothing you can't have. You might just have to make it yourself. But it is a slippery slope. And so I'm not necessarily telling people like, hey, just eat carbs. It's no big deal. It is a big deal.
It's such a difficult subject, isn't it? And how you just can't dictate for somebody else is what it comes down to.
Yeah, I don't want to throw this man under the bus, but let's be honest. I'm sure a lot of your audience knows the name Thomas Seyfried. He's the cancer researcher. His work is amazing. I admire him so much. I saw him at a conference 2 years ago and he was drinking a beer, and it wasn't a low carb beer. It wasn't a light beer. It was a regular beer, because you know what? Sometimes you just have to kick your heels up and live and have fun. And if Tom Seyfried can have a beer every now and then, knowing what he knows about cancer and glucose, then I don't think a very occasional piece of whatever is that big a deal.
Exactly. I completely agree with you.
And I don't mean to throw Dr. Seyfried under the bus.
We've outed him.
I want people to understand that even the professionals are not so zealous about this and so black and white and like, I hate the word Nazi, so I'm not going to use that, but just so zealot-like. We're just not like that.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. And going back the other way, I know it's something I can do very occasionally and I'll be fine. If I do it too regularly, or actually, moreover, if I combine it with emotional ups and downs, which my UK visits usually are, then that's a recipe for disaster.
Yeah.
And so it's about knowing myself. But I know there are some people who just literally one bite of something is just going to throw them off completely. So I can't say to them, well, it's okay for you to have one thing every now and then and live a little and all the rest of it, because they know for them it's not. so you just can't dictate for somebody else, can you?
No.
What I do caution people, if they've been really good and really strict for a long time, and then they have this event coming up, like a wedding or something like that, and they think, I want to fit in and I want to have a good time and I want to, have all those things. And the only word of caution, and it's no kind of judgment at all in whether they choose to have that food or not, because I think everyone should make their own decision, and I'm never going to judge you for whatever that decision is. What the word of caution, though, is, especially if you've been strict for a long time, if you suddenly dump those things in your system, you might feel really, really bad. You could end up running to the toilet. You could end up feeling dizzy and sick. So, if you are planning a really big, important event where you're going to eat those things, I would actually recommend doing a little test study a couple of weeks before, because the last thing you want to do at an important event is completely ruin it for yourself.
That's so true. And I think those kind of effects probably happen more the next day. They're not quite so immediate, but you're absolutely right. Brace yourself for not feeling good. But I also caution people, if you're going to do that, and it depends on the extent of how far and how hard you stray from low carb or keto, do yourself a favor. Do not get on the scale the next morning.
Yeah.
Don't get on the scale. Don't test your blood sugar. Why? Why are you going to test your blood sugar when you know you've just eaten a piece of chocolate cake?
You know it's going to tell you off, so don't do it.
And the scale, because people don't understand that you cannot gain 3 or 4 pounds of fat overnight. They'll get on the scale. Oh, I don't even know what. I had 2 cookies and I'm up 4 pounds. That's just water. It's the water weight coming back in the same way that you lost all that water weight very quickly in the first few days you went low carb. It's just the reverse process. So I just say, if you're going to do that, don't get on the scale. Don't test your blood sugar. Why are you, if you know, and you are making a conscious decision to do something that you know is maybe not the greatest thing, why make it worse for yourself? I don't see the point in that.
Yeah, I think maybe it's punishing yourself a bit more, isn't it?
Yeah, or if you're going to do that, if you are going to weigh yourself, know that you will be up a few pounds, but it's okay. It's normal. It's to be expected. And that weight is going to go away pretty quickly. It's not that you gained, several pounds of fat. Going back to something you said before about how for some people, one little bite of something is the kiss of death. That's true. And I also think, like for me personally, I do have what I call trigger foods. There are certain foods, whether it's sweets or starches, that I can eat and I can actually truly have 2 or 3 bites and I'm fine. I don't want more, or have one item and I don't want more. There are other foods, including low carb and keto friendly foods, that I have no off switch with.
Yeah.
If I start eating, forget it. I want all of it, and then I want even more. And so for those, I have to have absolutely none. There's no wiggle room, and I just have to say, you know what? That food is not part of my life any longer, because the consequences are not worth it. And for me, it's not even physical. I don't feel physically ill. It's the guilt and the shame and the self-blame. And that's just not worth it. And like I said, for me, just be honest with your audience, it's peanuts and peanut butter are 2 of the big ones. And not even the sugary kind, just the ones that's straight up peanuts. I can't stop. And so I will literally eat half a jar of peanut butter in a sitting. Are peanuts and peanut butter keto friendly? Yeah. I mean, they're slightly carbier because they're actually legumes, but they're not nuts, but they're still relatively high in fat, high in fiber, low in carbs. But when you eat it in the quantity that I was eating it, like let's say I've had 2 meals that day, and then on top of that, I eat 1,000 calories of peanut butter, not really helpful. So I think if you have trigger foods and you know what they are, then maybe in the foods you do choose to stray with or cheat with, you better not make those your stray foods.
Exactly. And I think it's something useful to test, actually. A guest spoke about this in a podcast a while back. People often test foods for a glucose response. And she spoke about testing foods for your emotional response. So whether it's a trigger food or not, and actually sometimes to take those down to really small and fine ingredients. And yes, I mean, peanuts, peanut butter, I hear that a lot.
Yeah.
And I'm the same.
I don't have that problem with almond butter, cashew butter. I don't even like those. It's only, what is it about peanuts?
Yeah, you just can't
it's
stop,
very common.
can you? So I mean, they're the kind of thing that I will buy it occasionally, but with the knowledge that I am going to overeat it. And I either make that decision to have it and buy as small a quantity as possible and go with that, or yes, I just don't buy it in the first place.
Yeah.
And it is a good point to make that even if the foods are keto, and that's another one of my bugbears a little bit, when you get screamed at, it's not keto or it's keto, because so there are things that are very much keto, there are things, or low carb, you could say the same thing, and there are things that are very much not. There are some black and white cases,
yes,
but there's a huge amount of grey in the middle that comes down to so many different things.
I want to hug you so much because I could not agree more. I've said this before. It's like I'm like a broken record, but I've had clients that come to me that are scared to eat red bell peppers because of the carbs. Now, granted, they have more carbs than green peppers. They have more carbs than kale, but they're not exactly breakfast cereal. You know, there's a spectrum. They're not exactly chocolate chip cookies. We're talking about red peppers or carrots. People become terrified to eat carrots. And I'm not saying you could eat 2 pounds of carrots. Have 1 carrot shredded in a salad. That's not going to ruin your low carb diet. And I just was at an event with Dr. Eric Westman, who I'm sure your audience knows his name. He's very prominent in the low carb and ketogenic world. And he kind of said the same thing. He's like, there's really no food that's off limits. It's all about the total amount of carbohydrate that you are consuming. And I think he would probably agree that, probably bread is not the best choice. You know, bagels, pasta, potatoes, not the best choice. But when it comes to things like strawberries or red peppers or, some fruits and vegetables that are slightly higher in carbohydrates, they're not off limits, and they're certainly not keto. It's all about the total amount that you're eating.
Exactly.
That kills me, that not keto. Like, who made you the keto police? Please.
Yeah, where's this rule book? I'd love to see it with it all written down in black and white, because that would be very useful. Like you said before, it'd be really handy, wouldn't it, to know exactly what you couldn't eat and the exact results you'd get. But and I mean, on the other end of the scale, there's the if it fits your macros crowd who say it doesn't actually matter what it is as long as you don't go over a carb count. And that gets very sticky as well, because in theory you could live on Mars bars and white bread and not very much of it, obviously, but you could work out how much of those things you could eat and still fit your macros and probably be ketogenic, because you'd get readings of ketones, but it's not a great way to eat. So it's such a difficult and variable balance, isn't it, to find what's right?
Yeah, part of me sort of supports the if it fits your macros, but I also think, because if it fits your macros, you might be able to eat a slice of bread every day. But I think, obviously some of those starchier and sugarier foods really make people crave more and more. It's very hard to eat 1 piece of bread because you have 1 and you want 10 more. But I think probably, if anything, where that if it fits your macros thing, I don't like it is, you could blow 10 or 15 grams of carbohydrate on a slice of bread, or you could have 10 or 15 grams of carbohydrate from a huge pile of broccoli and spinach and peppers and mushrooms and asparagus and things that are at least going to get you a lot more micronutrients, a lot more vitamins and minerals, fiber. And of course, right now in the zero carb carnivore world, there's a lot of debate as to whether we even need fiber. Maybe we don't. But the point is that at least those foods are going to be much more nutrient dense than a candy bar, even if that candy bar fits within your macros.
Exactly. And ultimately, because like you said, those things are probably going to make you crave more food.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what you're not going to be able to do.
I dare you to stop at 10 M&Ms.
Exactly.
I dare you.
You can have this tiny weeny portion. That's okay from a macro point of view, but you're going to be starving hungry for the rest of the day.
Yeah.
Oh, it's a tricky one, isn't it, that I go round and round with.
But here's the thing too. I support whatever works.
Yeah, me too. What works for you?
Yeah, if somebody wants to use the Fits Your Macros, if you are happy with the results you're getting, keep doing what you're doing. Even as a low-carb nutritionist, I don't care what people eat. If you're happy with the way you feel, with the way you look, with your health, then keep doing it. If somebody comes to me and says, well, I do X, Y, and Z, and okay, is it working? All right.
That's the thing. That's the health perspective, isn't it? That often some of those foods, like for me, anything that has wheat in it, okay, if it had a tiny bit, because I'm not celiac and I don't have an instant allergic reaction to it. But if I ate even a small amount of foods containing wheat over a week, say, I would see that in my migraines and my depression. Even if I was fitting my macros, that particular ingredient would have an effect on me. But, for somebody else, it might be fine. So it really is my mantra, what works for you. But I do think it's so important. And it's one of the big things that I wanted to get across with this podcast, was just to show how different we all are.
Yeah.
Well, it's been fantastic. I've really enjoyed throwing all these things about with you today. It's been fantastic. Perhaps we could wrap up with your top tip for the listeners.
My top tip? That depends on context. So, all right, my top tip would be take this seriously. Take your health and your diet seriously, but don't let it control your life. If all you do all day is think about what you're eating and what you're not eating and what you weigh and what your ketone level is, please do your heart a favor and take a break. Not take a break from the diet, but and I even wrote a blog post about this. I called it an information vacation. Take 24, 48, 72 hours away from the blogs, the podcasts, the videos, except for, this video, of course. Everyone should watch this one. But no, give yourself permission to take a social media break from low carb. Go indulge in some other hobby that you've been neglecting because you've become obsessed with keto and low carb. Get back into music or architecture or gardening or something else. Keto is awesome. We all love it, but it's not life itself.
And some people do get just too obsessed with the details, too upset. They track every single thing and they're panicking, and they'll put a post up at the end of the day. Okay, well, these are my macros. These are what I'm supposed to have every day. And here I am with my last meal to go, and I've got to have X number of grams of protein, X number of grams of carbs, and I haven't got any fat left, or I've got lots of protein left, and I have, it doesn't have to be that hard.
What I love about low carb and ketogenic is that the food is delicious.
Much.
You could be on a quote unquote diet and eat steak with blue cheese on it. This diet, this way of eating is meant to be enjoyed and savored and relished. It's not supposed to be a calculus project. It's not supposed to be a math assignment. Some people really do best when they track and weigh and measure their food, and that's fine. If it's a tool that helps you, use it. But this way of eating is supposed to enhance your life, not make it worse. That's all.
Exactly. So if you're getting into that tendency of it starting to rule your life, you need to make some changes and let loose a bit. Another motto that you have from your website that I particularly liked that you live by is real people need real food, which I think just fits into that, doesn't it? And enjoying your life with it.
Yeah. Every time I hear that real people need real food, what I think is all of the women, and I want to say young women, but really it's women of all ages, who just deprive themselves, who starve themselves without even realizing, because they think that 1,100 calories a day is enough for a grown adult human being. And when they're working out and they're raising kids and they have a job, that's not enough food. And or just thinking that, a bowl of lettuce is a meal. No, I'm going to stand up for all the women out there. I eat food. If I go on a date with a gentleman and I don't hide, I don't have to say, oh, I'll take the small salad with the fat-free dressing on the side. I'm like, I'll take the burger with the cheese and the bacon on it, please. I'm not going to lie, and I love that this way of eating lets us eat substantial, real, tasty, fatty foods, and we don't have to feel guilty about it.
Exactly. And it's one of the reasons why, although I've had periods of tracking on low carb, I don't really need to, because I spent that time, however many years ago, scrupulously measuring everything when I was doing the whole calorie counting, deprivation thing. So I'm really good at guesstimating how many carbs are in things, because I've done that with that. And also it has that association with deprivation and calorie counting, and don't want to get back to that. Thanks. Well, thank you. It's been fantastic talking to you today. I've really enjoyed it. Thank you, Amy.
Thank you. I hope this is helpful. I really hope we've dispelled some of the myths and sort of like calmed people's fears out there.
I do too. And I'm sure people will let us know.
All right. Well, thanks so much for having me.
Thank you. To get the resources and links from the show, please go to ketowomanpodcast.com. Are you my next extraordinary woman? Maybe you've got an idea for a show, a topic you want to hear about. Let me know how I can tickle your earbuds by dropping me a line at daisy@ketowomanpodcast.com. If you fancy joining me on this exciting adventure and want to help me create new episodes, please go to my Patreon page at patreon.com/ketowoman, or simply hit the support button on the Keto Woman podcast website. It's thanks to the two keto dudes that I'm hosting this podcast. So please consider heading to their Patreon page at patreon.2keto.com and help them bring you more podcasts like this one. Please help other people hear about and find this podcast by reviewing the show on iTunes and Facebook. Every star and review really does help. It doesn't go unnoticed by me, the people who regularly like, share and comment on my posts. Your support means the world to me. Thank you. This week's quote is from Sandra Luxinger. Sandra posted this in my Facebook group, and I thought it was too good not to use as one of my end quotes, so I asked her if I could pinch it. When you start to panic because Brussels sprouts are so amazing you can't stop eating them, and then you remember it used to be Oreos. Progress, not perfection. Keto life. Bye-bye, keto lovelies.